Parables and proverbs.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Parables and Proverbs. I'm your host, Selah Kante. I hope everybody had a happy new year out there. And if you didn't go and check the last episode, we went over AI and looking towards the future and making a lot of parallels with the characteristics of God, like omnipotence, omniscience, and things like that, with attributes of AI and the things that they're going with. So if you haven't checked that episode, I recommend you guys go and look that up. So today we're going to be going over getting drunk in the spirit. And if you don't know what that is, we'll start unpacking a little bit. But again, there's a concept that I've been thinking about for a little bit. But so when we talk about fruits of the spirit, right, like the Beatitudes, actually, let's start with that. Matthew 5:3-10. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So again, when we talk about the Beatitudes, when we talk about the fruits of the Spirit, right, like in Galatians 5:22, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? All these things we would call fruits of the Spirit, right? When you say, oh, judge them by their fruit, right? So these are the things we look to. But so being drunk in the Spirit, what is that, right? So this is the fermenting of bad fruit over time, right? And people who, in my personal opinion, I see a lot today where they have this yearning to be stuck in the spirit or stuck in spiritual things and not be in reality, right? So again, what are some bad fruit we would go over, right? So like greed, anger, evil desires, malice, deceit, sexual immorality, impurity, jealousy, lust, enviness, selfish ambition, right? All these things is what we would call or list as bad fruits. And so again, a lot, especially in today, I see all the time where we can be stuck in the spirit or say we want to be focused on spiritual things and really be having bad fruit. And as those things ferment over time, excuse me, it'll cause you to be in a separate reality from the reality we live in, right? And so again, just starting with like malice, deceit, greed, right? Impurity, those things, right? With me, I'm all about pointing the finger first. And so I want to talk about a couple people that are within the church that before we start talking about other spiritual topics, because again, I come from a Christian background. So again, our Kenneth Copelands, our Joel Osteens, right? They're claiming to be high, mighty spiritual people, right? But Kenneth Copeland is flying in private jets and everything when he and has this huge mansion, and he was supposed to have a plot of land. He told all the people who was sowing into his ministry that, oh yeah, we'll have this like retirement place for everybody to come and move in. And so he has his mansion and everything, but there's nothing for all the people who are sowing seeds into his ministry. And he's flying around private jets. He said, they said, "Excuse me, Mr. Kenneth Copeland, why did you buy the private jet?" He said, "When Tyler Perry gave me the price, I couldn't help but buy it." And again, it just is going to show you. And again, if he was doing that to like fly missionaries over and stuff like that, that would be a lot more understandable. But when you're using it for yourself to go from place to place, and charging on top of that, like, high prices when you're going to those places. And again, just like Joel Osteen, he had bought out, I forget which arena it was, but it was something, it was an old sports arena, and they ended up buying it, and I think it was like 5 million, so they paid like 1 million for 5 years on it. But so when the hurricane happened, I can't remember which hurricane it is, forgive me. But when the hurricane happened, they shut all their doors and they weren't letting anybody into their church. And again, this is supposed to be a church where we help the people, right? Help the needy. I think we made mention of it, I think like the first episode or maybe the second. But again, just showing how, again, you'd be so caught up in the spirit or making you have this perception of being a spiritual person, right? But you're not so far disconnected from reality, right? And letting a lot of bad fruit permeate over time, right? So again, when we look at like Bethel Church, right? There's a clip from like the 90s, and dude claimed to move from it now, but even still today, they'll even say the same thing. They'll say, "Oh yeah, we're drunk in the spirit." And again, as we said, with the fruits of the spirit, right? One of them being self-control. You see them barking, crawling around on the floor, claiming that it's the Holy Spirit, but having no sense of self control and rolling all over the floor and things like that. And again, going to your Benny Hinn's, being slain in the spirit, that there's no self control there, right? Everybody's all over the place, getting caught up again in this wanting to seem like good spiritual fruit when in reality it's bad fruit, right? And then you have others like David Diga, which is was actually a student of Benny Hinn. So that I mean, you see a lot of the stuff where he gets from Benny Hinn, with a lot of the deliverance and things like that. And that's I don't not believe in deliverance, but again, understanding these concepts, and again, that would probably be a good one for us to do in the future, is talking about ancient understandings of what uh, demonology was, right? But so to get back into this concept of being drunk in the spirit, right? And this bad fruit that permeates over time that people get stuck in and re-emphasize the spirituality more so than reality. And especially in my opinion, I think they both are, like, if you've ever seen an image of a tesseract, right, like the 4D cube, and you see how it goes in and out of itself, right? So I think that's more so the spiritual and the physical interplaying with itself, right, where they're they both matter and they both have an effect on each other, right? And so again, one of these ancient religions talking that emphasize this spiritual emphasize the spiritual nature and the emphasis on it for salvation and how this material world goes bad. So, if anybody is not familiar with Gnosticism, right? Gnosticism was a diverse religious movement in antiquity from the first to fifth centuries, centered on achieving salvation through secret intuitive knowledge or gnosis of the divine, liberating the spirit from the evil material world created by a lesser deity, the demiurge. And so again, with within their theology, they talk about how the serpent was really the good one and how they're trying to tell Eve about how Yahweh made this material world as a trap. And you hear that a lot again within today's language when talking about things like the Matrix. And again, we were talking about that on last episode, right? And for me, it's not to say that this matrix like thing doesn't exist. And funny enough, actually, the Bible is one of the first ones to use the word matrix. And I want to say it's in I knew you before you were knitted in your mother's womb, right? the word for womb there is matrix, I'm pretty sure. Uh, I'd have to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure. But again, this reality is all centered on Christ, though, and all pointing to Christ, especially in my opinion. Again, I'm speaking from a Christian perspective here, but you see this fractal like nature, and again, this is where we can connect with a lot of other people, with like new age people, where especially in my opinion, you can be describing the same thing but be using different terms. But that doesn't mean you're not describing the same spiritual concept, right? So, but you might have a little um, more nuance to a specific term rather than the other one. But just for an example, though, like just in English, we have love, right? But so in Greek, there's over 4 different types of love, right? Most people are like eros or agape, or can't remember the other two off my head. But point being, those are they're being more specific on the aspects of love, because really love can incorporate a lot of things, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, right? But so let's go back to Gnosticism and the emphasizing on the salvation through this secret knowledge or gnosis. And so again, you see that in a lot of today's society, where a lot of people think that they'll be able to achieve their salvation through knowledge, right? And it's not we've made mention before, it's not to say that these are formulas to say, oh, if you do A plus B, you'll achieve salvation, right? A plus B doesn't equal salvation. We don't have to do not do anything, but there's nothing we can do, right? The Bible says our good deeds are like filthy rags, right? But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do good. But again, the emphasizing on the liberating the spirit from the evil in the supernatural world, and saying that this material world is bad, right? And talk about, oh, again, these are the a lot of the ones that would propagate, oh, why would Jesus be born of a virgin? These, again, are the first ones that the early Christian fathers were fighting and debating against, like Nestorius and uh, uh, Marcionism and the Ebionites, right? And so, again, that's again coming from the Christian perspective, why it was so important, right? God brought himself down to humanity, and is so Old Testament is more so described as man reaching out to God, and New Testament is described as God reaching out to man, right? But so you see a lot of different things, different concepts that always get associated with these things, right? So one of them being this racial supremacy, uh, hints of racial supremacy, right? And so again, you see that within groups of like Nation of Islam or NOI, again, or Hebrew Israelites, where they're talking about the white man being the devil, right? And so again, we're all humans. No man is lesser than the other man, but you get caught up in this supremacy within your religion, saying, oh, you want to be so much high and mightier, like the Hebrew Israelites will use that in the essence of um, the Jews ruling over the earth. And again, you kind of see that in Kabbalah, in the I think it's the Adam Kadmon. But again, saying like we're instruments to fulfill God's will on earth. But so within rabbinic, Kabbalistic, Hasidic understandings of Judaism, they emphasize the Jews over everybody else, right? Them being the vessels. And again, that's one of the things that Paul says, A Jew is not one outwardly, but one inwardly, right? Not someone who circumcises outwardly, but one who circumcises their heart to the Lord, right? And so again, these are the emphasis on what he's saying by God reaching out to man, right? It's not just for one person or one group or any of that, but it's for everybody, right? And so again, you see within other racial supremacy people like Hitler, right? He was a Ariosopist, right? And if anybody doesn't know what Ariosophy is, it comes from theosophy. And theosophy was started by Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. And that's where you get a lot of these modern concepts of what you hear New Age of twin flames, star seeds, Age of Aquarius, right? And again, certain people will emphasize the when to have a certain kid or when themselves were born, right? And be like, oh well, I'm a star seed and I'm connected to all these different lineages and this and that. And again, if that is the case, I mean, sure, but again, just how we're just talking about NOI and the Hebrew Israelites, that shouldn't be a factor to say that that means you're better than the next person. And again, that's where a lot of these concepts and being stuck up and caught up in these concepts leads you to being drunk, right? And not in this reality anymore. Because again, their emphasis is on this knowledge to be obtained to like she's one of the first ones also to talk about the Akashic records, right? And talking about her guardians and this and that. And there are these deities, these counselors who would give her information. And again, you hear that within a lot of new age people. Um, but again, yeah, so a lot of this like reincarnation and things like that, or this modern version of it, really stems from Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. And so again, though, that's not just to point the fingers at them and say, "Oh, look at what they're doing," because you even have people within Christianity, again, like Prophet Lovi, who, again, if you listen to his language, he'll always talk about knowing the secret things of God, right? Again, this is this gnosis that we're talking about, and again, it's not that. Again, this is one of my things why I go against it because again, I don't think that it's like, oh, only certain specific people can understand these things. I think it's like anything else with anything, you apply yourself to wanting to learn the thing, and I think anybody can learn whatever they put their mind to, you know. But again, that's one of their like traps, if you will, to say that, oh, I'm higher or mightier because I know these quote unquote secret things and you don't, you know. And again, this is the bad fruit that we're talking about, right? You're is leading to this selfish ambition because the point of spirituality is not to be of yourself, but to help everyone else, right? And again, you'll hear them talk about these things, which it's funny in my opinion because you'll hear like again, I was talking about it before on a different episode about 4D consciousness, but and their description of it again being um not thinking of yourself but thinking of humanity and moving with humanity and whole as a nature. And yes, I agree with that, but again, it's just funny how you see all the other things that are a lot more self-centered and not really about humanity but you and yourself. And again, to me, I more so mean about like reincarnation and things like that because again, okay, you might, if you think you were a flapper from the 1900s, then what does that have to do with where you are today? that's not going to help you be a better or worse person. And you can get caught up in that where you're not doing anything in today's reality, in today's society, right? But so I just also want to point out again, these within these groups, right? Like when we start talking about like um enlightenment, right? This enlightenment tends to lead to, oh, you're crazy, or they don't understand you because you're so enlightened, right? You see the things that other people don't. And again, you see the parallels when you talk about like over the top conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat people, right? And it leads to that same type of thing. And again, it's in my opinion escaping this reality and going to the spiritual and emphasizing on that and really distracting away from what's going on here, right? And so when you look at other people like Gopi Krishna, and he talks about his Kundalini awakening, other people might describe it as a Kundalini syndrome because they talk about, again, not being prepared for this. So, oh, yeah, not being prepared for this. So I want to lean into more of, again, the warning signs, if you will, of the people, again, when we're talking about these spiritual practices and these enlightenments and the psychosis, if you will, that really follows with it. So if you look at people like Gopi Krishna, and you look at his book, he talks about after his spontaneous Kundalini awakening, a powerful spiritual energy rising without preparation, turning his normal life into chaotic, nightmarish ordeal of intense physical sensations, psychological instability, and psychic phenomena. Right, and that's the description on the book. But so one of the quotes from the book, he himself says, "The days that followed his Kundalini awakening had all the appearance of a prolonged nightmare. It seemed as if I had abruptly precipitated myself from the steady rock of normality into a madly racing whirlpool of abnormal existence." And again, you see this within psychedelic communities and things like that, where they'll have this mind break, if you will. And again, to go to these conspiratorial ones, and can you really even say if it's a conspiracy anymore? Because again, they've dropped the FBI files, but things like MK Ultra, right? So again, they would use these things specifically to fracture people's minds on purpose. And again, even not it being from an outside source, people themselves searching for inner awakening, enlightenment, talk about these same experiences of having psychosis, right? And so, again, going, because we were talking about Kabbalah earlier, right? Looking into like Merkava and the precursor of that with like, excuse me, Hekelo and the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Mishnah and I can't remember the other one. But so Simon Ben Zilma, right? This story of the four who enter Pardes, or the four who enter the orchard. Um, Again, this is one of the precursors of the tree of life and the emanations of God. And so they're talking about going, again, in my opinion, they talk about going down, but they're going into heaven, but they're going down. But again, if you understand the ancient understanding cosmology, again, when we talk about firmaments, and people typically go to a flat Earth, but it's not the understanding that the Earth was flat, but a 2D understanding of our 3D world. And again, that even goes up further to like 4D, right, and things like that, because we're talking about, again, the spiritual over the physical, right? But so Simon Ben Zilma and the four who enter Pardes, right? They say that he lost his mind and he went crazy. He lost it, or he became deranged, essentially meaning his mental state deteriorated, that he lost his reasoning or became overwhelmed. In the literal sense, they say that his mind was shattered or torn. And so again, you have the other ones like Aher, or that's more of a nickname, because again, he okay, the four entered, only one came out okay, right? One lost his life, one went crazy, and the other one became a heretic, which is what the Aher is. And I think it means like other. I can't remember specifically, but they refer to him as Aher. They don't even put his name in it anymore. But again, showing this emphasis in a spiritual and causing harm in the physical, because you're so caught up in this drunk like state, right? You're away from this reality. And so again, we're talking about the chase of enlightenment, right? And the parallels with seeing things that others don't see, right? And so even in the ancient Greek understanding, you had things like uh, mania, right? And that's where we get the modern term mania from, right? And we're just talking about Gopi Krishna, and we're just talking about Benzoma. Uh, yeah, we're just talking about Gopi Krishna and Simon Benzoma, and how their enlightenment led to this psychosis-like state, right? But even in the ancient understanding, this mania, if you will, wasn't just a bad thing. They specifically went looking for these things. And so um, in the ancient Greek, mania or mania means madness, frenzy, or enthusiasm, referring to a state of intense, often divinely induced, irrational passion, fury, or obsession, personified by the goddess spirits Manea, who drove people to madness, and also connected to divine inspiration like prophecy and poetry. The concept encompasses both negative insanity, obsession, rage, and positive divine inspiration. And so people like Plato described theia, mania, or divine madness as a gift from the gods, right? Leading to prophecy from Apollo, ritual like trances from those of like Dionysus and Bacchus. Um, you also have the concepts of, I think it's like the seven muses, uh, referring to the seven liberal arts, right? And the passionate love, like we were talking about earlier, or Aphrodite or Eros, right? And so again, that's a good. I'll start with the love part. So again, we even see that in a modern context where you have people who are, um, I can't remember the term, but when they kill a lover in a love passion, right? And they have a specific term for that, where again it's like a break of psychosis, leading them to kill that person because they're caught up in this passion, right? And so again, you see how this these overwhelming emotions um, can also lead to these trance-like states. Again, you like we are saying, these bad fruits, right? Like anger, right? You let yourself sit up in this angry state all the time and just fester on it. If you're mad at somebody, you're 9 times out of 10 gonna end up doing something to that person rather than either finding a way to let it out or let it go or talk to the person, right? You're if you fester on it and let it sit and let it brew, right, you're probably gonna end up doing something. But so again, even within like the cult of Bacchus and Dionysus, and again, I don't mean cult in like today's term, but I mean they have some nuances. But the ancient term of cult, really just meaning more like a mystery school, right? Of Bacchus and Dionysus was again, they were women groups predominantly who would follow. these gods, and Dionysus was the god of wine. And so again, they would get in this trance-like state with wine, sometimes other things like ecstasy or other ancient psychedelics, but they would mix that with this wine to get into this state, right? This theomania, this divine madness that Plato described. And so again, when you see all them pictures of them dancing like that, right? Again, put that in a correlation with today's society when you see people dancing in the club and movies, and they have that same feeling that's or emotion that's trying to be conveyed, if you will, like letting it go, letting your hair down, right? And so again, that's literally the archetype of these women, the Bacchae, who followed them, right? They would go into the wilderness. The archetype was the mom who left her life to go in the wilderness and be free, right? And so again, you see those characteristics even within modern day feminism, right? And saying you don't need to have this emphasis on the family, but to leave society and leave the things of this world to go be free and enjoy yourself, right? But so again, you have other people like where it was talking about prophecy, right? Specifically to Apollo, and you have those like um the Oracle at Delphi, right? And you see that same thing being portrayed in the movie 300, where they go and speak to the Oracle, and you see how she's like all up and everything, right? But so again, they say that she was in this Thea Menea state, and she to prophesy or speak to or speak spoken through rather uh on behalf of the deity, right? And so that's again when you see her speaking, it's like, you know. But again, it's not that it's just regular, but they would specifically put themselves in this trance-like state, this theomenea, to do said prophecy, trances, poetry, um, and connect with people or gods or goddesses like Aphrodite or Eros, right? And so again, you even have the same things of like modern words of panic, right? And panic comes from Pan, the god Pan, right? And the word panic derives from the Greek panikon dania, and this was the fear that was attributed to Pan. So again, when we talk about like fight or flight, right? That flight, if you will, that fear, that panic was attributed to Pan. His sudden unseen presence in lonely places was believed to cause sudden irrational terror in travelers and hunters, leading to a state of frenzied fear that might be described as a type of trance or altered state. And so again, you see that within modern contexts of uh, Jonestown, how are these, or even Charles Manson, right, and the people that were following him, again, looking to see that they were on psychedelics to be put into this frenzied state and this other spiritual reality that wasn't of this world. Because again, you see Charles Manson and him talking to his followers about, oh, it's going to be a race war leading up this and that. But again, he's doing all this while they're off of acid. They're tripped out their mind. But so again, they're getting caught up in this, and so when they did all the things, they were still on that. And again, the same thing in Jonestown, right? This oh, if we drink the juice to leave this world, right? And emphasize on this spirituality. And so again, when you see a lot of these doomsday uh cults, that's what they're emphasizing. Oh, this world is poop anyways. We need to go back to the spiritual world. Everything's doomed to hell. And again, that's not to like, what is it? That's not helping anything. Yes, things may seem as if they are going to hell, but again, that doesn't mean you should just let it, right? We're all still obligated to be good people and bring good about the world. But if you just let the bad overtake, then it's just going to overtake. You know, we still have good in the world, and that's what we're here to do, is be those pawns to fight against the bad, right? Um, and so again, you have this abuse that ends up happening to others, right? That's more like this spiritual narcissism, right? When somebody uses their spiritual beliefs or practices to fuel an inflated ego, believing they are superior or more enlightened or have special access to divine knowledge, right? Remember that gnosis, leading to manipulation and fear for admiration rather than genuine humility or growth. It's the ego hijacking spiritual journeys, manifesting as a guru complex where individuals seek power, control, or validation through their perceived special connection, misusing faith for self glorification and harming others, especially in cults or leadership roles. So again, we were talking about the bad fruit, right? And the emphasis ends up being on yourself and not others. When again, that's what spirituality is supposed to be, is the emphasis on helping others and not ourselves, right? Jesus tells us to deny ourselves. And so another term that might help describe this is spiritual bypassing. And spiritual bypassing is using spiritual ideas, practices, or beliefs as a defense mechanism. So there's on the other hand, to avoid dealing with unresolved emotional pain, psychological wounds, trauma, or developmental tasks, essentially rising above messy human feelings instead of processing them. Coined by John Wellwood, it often involves premature spiritual quick fixes like excessive positivity, love bombing, dismissing pain as low vibration, which hinders genuine healing and self acceptance, preventing authentic spiritual growth and healthy engagement with reality. So again, when you're, oh, that's just my karma, again, there's only so far you can go with that. If somebody gets abused in a physical relationship, you're like, oh, well, that's just your karma from your last one. So you had to experience the abuse in this one. You were abusive in your last one. That's not right to say at all. I don't think anybody would agree with that. But again, when you get in these spiritual communities, that's what the emphasis starts leaning towards, is that you it in my opinion, again, coming from the Christian perspective, this is when we start talking about duality, right? And that good versus evil, and you can't know good unless you know what evil is. And again, I completely don't agree with that. That's again like saying to your own child, oh, you have to know what a bad dad's like to know what a good one's like, you know. And again, I just don't subscribe to that. But again, you see this emphasis on the ego death, if you will, right? And so again, you hear that again with people like Kanye. He made a song called "Ego Death." Again, most people have this experience when they're in this trance-like psychedelic state, where again they talk about the ego being false, and again, you have that from people even like Eckhart Tolle and like Freud and Carl Jung, right, where they talk about the ego as a false conceptual sense of self create of ugh, the ego is a false conceptual sense of self created by the mind through identification with thoughts, stories, possessions, roles, and appearances, operating as a protective armor of me versus them that thrives on comparison, superiority, and fear of being nothing, leading to suffering and separation from true being. It's the compulsive, unobserved thinking and the voice in the head that dictates your identity, creating a sense of separate I that constantly seeks validation and fears loss, contrasting with the deeper, peaceful presence of your true self. And so again, it's this description of these masks that we put on going out into this world describing our ego, right? To say that you put on these masks to project yourself as better than what you perceive yourself to be, right? Or what you actually are. And so again, with people like Jung, the ego is a center of consciousness, the I that provides our sense of identity, continuity, and awareness of the world, acting as the executive part of our personality that manages daily life, thoughts, and decisions, while essential for functioning. Jung viewed the ego as just a small part of the total psyche, with the true goal being individuation, which involves transcending the limited ego to connect with the deeper whole self. So again, you have other things like people might be familiar with like shadow work, also by Carl Jung, right? And that's the psychological process of exploring and integrating the unconscious parts of ourselves that we deny, repress, or dislike, aiming for wholeness by acknowledging both negative traits and hidden positive potentials, often revealed through triggers, dreams, or projections, leading to greater self awareness and authenticity. And so, again, a lot of this shadow work in a modern sense is the integrating of your past traumas, right? And again, I think that's a good thing to do, to learn from that. But again, where if you get so caught up in it, right, and just focus on that one thing, it can lead you to be unaware in other aspects, right? And again, causing that abuse again. So a lot of times I'll see or hear people describe, oh, I don't like doing this or I don't like doing that, and or I don't want to pass this on to my kid. And instead of actually working on it, just saying that and acknowledging it, but continuing to do it, right? So how good is it really that we can acknowledge said things, but we don't actually work on said things, right? And so even within like things like Stoicism, they had the idea of shadow work, but it wasn't referred to as the shadow, right? Um, but it referred to the darker, repressed parts of ourselves, our fears, suppressed desires, and flaws that we must comfort or confront and integrate, not ignore, for true virtue and freedom. A concept heavily influenced by Carl Jung's psychology, where the shadow holds unconscious aspects of personality. Stoicism's self knowledge involves examining these hidden motives to build inner resilience and live authentically by transforming negative impulses into wisdom rather than letting them control actions, leading to a more complete balanced self. And so again, they recognized the value of emotions, but they emphasized the importance of managing them rather than being controlled by them. Um, and when individuals adopt an overly detached approach, they may become emotionally numb, right? So again, get to a point of saying certain feelings or emotions you won't acknowledge, and you become emotionally numb to those who are trying to seek refuge to you, you know? And so again, whether it be Stoicism, whether it be Carl Jung, Freud, Tolle, whether it be Blavatsky, whether it be Alice Bailey, whether it be Benny Haynes, whether it be uh, Benzoma, whether it be uh, uh, your Benny Haynes, I think I said him. But again, you see this emphasis on these bad fruits that lead to a detached sense of what's really going on, you know, and a lot of bypassing of reality are people who's being affected in your day to day, you know. But so I hope you guys learned a lot today. I hope it wasn't too mind boring and too much information just thrown on you guys. But again, this is what I'm trying to describe when we're talking about being drunk on the Spirit, right? There's this emphasis on being stuck in the Spirit and neglecting what's going on physically. Again, and most things, yes, should have a balance. And maybe again, we'll have a whole episode specifically on dualism, but to have a balance in saying, oh, you have to have the good to know, or have the bad to know the good, or two separate things, you know. But hope you guys appreciated today's episode. Hope you learned a lot. I'm Selah Kande, and this is Parables and Proverbs.